here we are in September, where we celebrate Labor Day. So, little history, and then let's jump into it. What is Labor Day? This is very peculiar to be in America and talking about Labor Day. I assume you all know that in the rest of the world, labor is celebrated, has its day, but it is on May 1. Almost everywhere in the world, labor is celebrated May 1, May Day. And that is because of an event that happened in 1886, I believe, in Chicago, when a group of workers were demonstrating for something which in those days was a pie-in-the-sky idea, the 40-hour week, that the work would be reduced to be 40 hours long per week, because workers typically worked much longer than that at that time. And they had a big demonstration, and somehow in the big demonstration, shots were fired, and there was a big to-do. And the police arrested the kinds of people that the police in those days enjoyed arresting. And in this case, they were anarchists in Chicago. I know this may come as a shock to you, but Chicago had anarchists. Not real many of them, and their population was severely reduced by the dozen or so that the police arrested. And they found them guilty, and they executed some of them. And that was considered an assault on the working class of the world, that it wasn't really proved that these people had anything to do with the shooting. They insisted that they were all innocent, that they had just been picked up by the police because the police were after the anarchists. I wasn't there, obviously. I don't know. But it became an international workers' holiday. And here in the United States, it was celebrated for a while, too, and that got a number of American politicians very upset. So they decided that we would not participate as a nation in the May Day celebrations the way people in almost every other country do. So we wouldn't have it on May. Little things make big differences in some countries. So we don't have anything on May 1st. We have little children who hold colored banners and dance around a pole. Labor happens in September. It's about as far away as you can get from May. And we do things here that nobody else does at all anywhere else, because a early Monday in September means exactly nothing anywhere else. But here we have Labor Day. Well, to be more accurate, we used to have Labor Day. Used to be a big holiday. I remember when I was younger, there was a time when Labor Day, there were parades, all the unions got up their outfits and carried their banners, the carpenters and the firefighters and the teachers and so forth. Most cities in America don't even have that anymore. I made a little experiment. I decided I would see what the newspaper of record in the United States might have to say on Monday, September 5th, a couple weeks ago, which was Labor Day. So I opened the New York Times that day. I subscribed to the New York Times. Please don't hold that against me. I subscribed to the New York Times, and I opened it. And I'm proud to tell you that on the front page of the New York Times, there was absolutely nothing devoted to any subject, no matter how far-fetched might be its connection to labor or Labor Day or labor events. Nothing. So I opened the paper and I read inside. I read the first section, I read the second, the sports section, the business section, nothing. Even USA Today, a really great newspaper, had something about Labor Day, but not the New York Times. Not one word. Amazing. They didn't even have a word about labor in the face of stunning facts about labor of this last couple weeks. That's what made it so interesting. The Friday before Labor Day, the 2nd of September, this month, for those of you who don't know, was the largest strike in the history of the world. Let me do this again. On the 2nd of September, this month, was the largest strike workers have ever mounted in the history of the world. Where? India. India. Tens of millions. The organizers said 150 million. The government said half of that. Whatever the truth is, it doesn't matter. It's the biggest. You think on Labor Day, 2 days later, maybe you'd say this is meaningful, just a little. No. No. In India, not that the New York Times needed to take account of it, not only were we talking about the greatest strike in the history of the human race, but the key, it was public employees, by the way, in India that were striking, public employee, but they're a very large part of the working class in India. They were striking, and the big issue was the minimum wage. They wanted a minimum wage higher than what the government offered. The government offered, ready? $136 a month. And the union said, too little, can't live on it. And that was a strike. But in this country, in the New York Times, nothing. What strike? What? Not important. Not something to comment on in its immediacy or in its larger implications on Labor Day 2000. For many years, until about a couple years ago, the European Commission, which is the governing body of Europe, was led by a Portuguese politician named Jose Manuel Barozso. Some of you who follow European economics will have remembered his name. He was in charge when the decision to basically destroy Greece as an economic unit was made and pushed through. He was the guy who believed in the importance of austerity, a program in which you cut government programs, raise taxes on the mass of people to pay off the debts that had been incurred by the countries to bail out the banks that had collapsed in 2008. This wonderful arrangement where the banks collapsed, that went to the government bailed them out. That was very expensive, and the government is recouping the money by not spending on silly things like, I don't know, Social Security and health care in Europe. Mr. Barroso pushed all of that. Last week, Mr. Barroso announced his new job. He's retired from his position as head of the European Commission, and he has taken a new job at a company called Goldman Sachs. Come on, folks. You can't be as naive as they want you to be. You can't. You're going to make me cry. You're going to make your mother and father cry. You're smarter than that. The man whose job it is to govern, to control, to monitor, to supervise the bank that's ripping off the people joins the bank as soon as his government job is over. In Europe, in the immediate aftermath, 140,000 people signed a petition attacking the former Portuguese Prime Minister's new role. French President François Hollande, a daring champion of being tough with business, said, quote, "This appointment may be legally possible, but it is morally unacceptable." This is a man who gets caught on his little motor scooter visiting his mistress on his days off. He's worried about moral acceptability. He's French, maybe. They moved to a different moral drum, who knows. Mr. Barroso could be stripped of his pension if he was found to be, you gotta love this, ethically compromised. I hope all of you avoid being ethically compromised. Although I guess for most of us it's already a little late. We've already been there and done that. And he would lose 15,000 euros a month. That's about 20,000 bucks. This is as serious a threat to him as if you spilled a couple of nickels on your way out of here. It's a punishment that proves the utter contempt these people have for you, me, and everybody else. We will work for the banks as long as we wish. We will go into the government with the blessings of our fellow bankers, and we will come back out to re-enter the loving arms of the banking industry we pretended to supervise while we were on extended vacation as a government minister. It is extraordinary, the level of, and there's no other nice word for this, of corruption, of the collusion between the business community and the government. Goldman Sachs now can go to any leader in Europe and remind them, be a good boy, or excuse me, a good girl. Be a good boy or girl, and when your job here as a leading government official is over, we have a very nice desk in a beautiful building on Lake Lucerne to overlook the lovely countryside, and there you can make more money than Jesus Christ imagined. And everybody will love you, and you can go to all the best restaurants. It's extraordinary, this kind of corruption. That's why getting excited, which I'm coming to a little bit later, getting excited about whether the problem is the private capitalist big business or the government is getting excited about a difference that doesn't exist and that doesn't matter. There's a man running for president of the United States named Johnson. He's all excited. The government is the problem. Stop. You really want this debate? The government or the business? These people wear one hat one day and the other hat the other day. Who are you tilting against? It's the same thing. They show us that all the time. Corporations buy the government. Mr. Barozzo has been bought, and he didn't even hide it because he doesn't have to. Even though the stories are all here, and if you go in case you're interested in the spelling, Barroso, Google him, you can get all the stories you want. It's been in the newspapers. As if to make the same point that the corporations buy, let me give you another story that hit the press this last week. So much has been going on, I don't even have to go back 2 weeks, or 3 or 4. I'm loaded up with just the last week. This is a story that appeared everywhere, and in this case, the companies are buying academics, which, by the way, they do with the same easy spirit with which they buy government officials. What was it? Well, according to an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, not a left-wing outfit. It's the official association of doctors in the United States, the prestigious one, and the JAMA Internal Medicine Journal carried a story this last week about the activities of the Sugar Research Foundation. What is that? Anytime something sounds like it's a research outfit for business, the operative word is business. You can really forget the other words. They are just window dressing. Business. What did the Sugar Research Foundation do? According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, here's what they did. They were upset that in the 1960s, that's when this story that they're covering happened. In the 1960s, Americans were being told that it wasn't good to be fat. It was better to be thin. This is going to come as a major surprise to all of us. And that to avoid obesity and all those other things, we shouldn't eat sugar because it makes you fat. This information was coming from some benighted nutritionists who were bemused in the idea they were helping people. The Sugar Research Foundation didn't like the idea. This, of course, had nothing to do with the fact that they were the Sugar Research Foundation, funded by the sugar industry, the producers and users of sugar, who, of course, were completely neutral about the thought that Americans would stop buying sugar in order to avoid getting overweight. So they did a big research, because they're a research foundation. They did a big research, and they discovered, which they then made public, they discovered that obesity, overweight, heart disease, 47 bad things were entirely due to fat. Don't eat fat. Cholesterol, fat, it's awful. It creeps up on you when you're sleeping and inserts itself into your chin. Don't do it. So successful were they by playing around with research, reporting some research, not other, playing games. And to make it all look good, the Sugar Research Foundation, and you gotta love this, contributed to the research of 2 Harvard professors who did the work to show that fat makes you fat, sugar is no problem. One of their slogans, if sugar was so bad, if eating candy was bad, how do you explain to all those little kids who aren't fat and who eat candy? High science this is. Very sophisticated. For the next 30 to 40 years, all of you, I assume, have come under the influence from your doctor, from your magazine article, from your television show, from your conversations with friends and family, that if you want to be healthy, watch out for all the fat. It's all wrong. It's all wrong. Turns out fat isn't so bad. It really is the sugar. It's only 40, 50 years later. And people died who went on diets they should never have been advised to do. You transformed the food industry because one group of food producers was clever and outwitted the others and got us to eat this and not that because it made them wealthy. Stories are full of it, but you can get it anywhere. And if any of you interested, you can come up here and look at this article. The sugar, by the way, no hesitation here, because you can actually make an honest headline. And one of the reasons you can make an honest headline about this thing is that it happened long ago. So you can sustain in Americans the deep, warm feeling that we don't have that anymore. And if you believe that, I will sell you the Brooklyn Bridge early next week. Sugar industry, just go find it and you will learn more about it. Okay. What do all this add up to? Well, if I had time, which I don't, I would tell you about some other events that happened. I'm going to actually only quickly in passing mention 2, because they will give you again a sense of what the phrase capitalist corruption means. Wells Fargo is one of the largest banks in the United States, has been for quite a while. They got caught. This last couple of weeks, they got caught. Here's what they did. They faked 2 million bank accounts and 500,000 credit card accounts. I mean, faked, phonied. They made them up. They, for example, got somebody's, a real person's name, and they said, you know, Joe Smith has an account here. Sometimes they debited the account for fees. Well, you have an account, and there's fees associated with the account. You hadn't asked for it. You didn't know about it. but you were now liable to pay the fees and the penalties and there were credit cards issued to you. They got caught. It was sad. Why is it sad? Because everybody who follows this knows, A, that a lot of other banks do that, who didn't get caught yet. And that if Wells Fargo is doing that, what else is Wells Fargo doing? But they got caught. And after much research by the appropriate government authorities, they were fined $185 million for doing this. So I'm an economist, so I did what economists are trained to do. I went and I looked at what was the business that Wells Fargo as a bank did in 2015, the last year for which we have statistics. And I looked there and I discovered how much profit they made, net revenue, you know, their income less their expenses last year. And it was about $22 billion, with a B, $22 billion. And then I did, this is advanced stuff here, I put 185 in the numerator of the fraction, I put 22 billion in the denominator, and I came up with 0.008%. In other words, this is a fine that can't even be called a slap on the wrist. This is a kiss on the wrist. You terrible person, I'm going to kiss your wrist. That's your punishment. That will certainly make sure you never do anything like that again. This is pathetic joke, but it's better. 2 days after this crisis broke, it turned out that the executive of Wells Fargo, who had been in charge of this section, had left the bank a couple months ago. This is an ongoing investigation. They knew very well a couple of months ago what was coming down the pike. She was severed from the bank after 27 years of being an executive. Her job had been to put a lot of pressure on Wells Fargo tellers and officials to get a certain number of accounts, new accounts each month, and a certain number of new credit card applications. That pressure, and if you did it, you got a prize. You got to go to Disneyland. First prize was a day in Disneyland. Second prize, 2 days in Disneyland. That's an old joke, I just had to do that, okay? And so she was given a severance package of $125 million. That was her kiss goodbye for having faked 2 million accounts and 500,000 credit cards, thereby giving a message to every other executive at Wells Fargo: do it as soon as possible. You too may get treated that way. This is like Mr. Barozzo. It's just the same thing. You really can't get excited about it, can you? Last item. Poor Ford Motor Company. You've heard of that. It's been around a while. They got caught too. It turns out that in a lot of Ford cars, as you're driving along, the door opens. You don't have to do anything. Just sit there, and the door opens. And if it's going around the corner, you can be ejected out of the open door. And this is done, there's no extra charge for a car that does this. And the Ford Motor Company had to recall huge number of cars because it turns out some Americans, not many, but some Americans would prefer that the car door not open without an effort on your part to achieve that outcome. This is the umpteenth failure of the automobile industry in this country. Just like the Wells Fargo story is the umpteenth failure. Let me go over. You all know, right? Ford Motor Company was some time ago caught putting those devices in the pollution, in the exhaust that give the phony results when you go to a pollution testing place. You know that General Motors basically had deaths attributed to their ignition problems that you may remember. You know that Toyota had those Takata airbags that blow up and kill you on a day when you'd rather not have that experience. And you know that Volkswagen, beat everybody by literally having millions of tons of pollution into the air because they phonied up, like Ford had done earlier, the device that gives you the outcome when you're being tested that is different from what you actually emit as you drive down the road. So how many people have emphysema because of it? How many people have asthma because of it? How many people died of lung cancer because of all this pollution? We don't know. But we have seen evidence after evidence that allowing automobile production to be done by people whose number one goal is profit will lead them to find ways of making profit that cause death, injury, and mayhem in the society. And the beauty of our society is all that evidence leads no one to say this is much too important an industry in the world to be allowed to be managed by private profiteers because look what they've done. This idea doesn't occur to anybody. So we're going to have a punishment. You're going to have to pay a fine. The same punishment we've been giving them for 50 years, with the result that they keep doing it. I believe the definition of insane is when you keep doing the same thing and it doesn't have the desired outcome, but you keep doing the same thing. They put you in special places if you behave like that. We are a whole society that behaves like that. The banks, the major banks in America have paid billions, by the way, billions already in fines, for getting together to collude to control interest rates in the world, the so-called LIBOR scandal in England. They got caught phonying the mortgages during the mortgage meltdown of 2008. They've got caught money laundering with gangsters around the world and drug money. They got caught most recently manipulating the foreign exchange market. Everything the banks do, they've been caught doing illegally or unethically. And once again, we're going to have, oh boy, a law, a rule, a commission. We've done all that. It doesn't work. And if you keep doing what doesn't work, you're crazy. You're the kind of person that's undermining America that Greenspan knows about. You're a crazy. What the conclusion is, why do we allow banking, something so central to every economy, to be in the hands of people whose first goal is to make money off of it? Not to serve the larger community, which depends on the money and the banking, but to make their own profit, and who turn out, what a shock, to do things that are good for their profit, even if it isn't good for the larger society. I just gave you 15 examples in 20 minutes, and I could give you 50,000 examples. The books are full of them. But the conclusion, what? That we shouldn't have a private sector? We shouldn't have a small number of people making these decisions? If large numbers of people were involved in all these decisions, it'd be much harder to pull this stuff off. The chances of it being exposed, whistleblower, and all that would be much greater. So let's cooperativize these industries, make them public co-ops, and then we will maybe take a step to reduce this. No. We're going to have another law, and another commission, and another bill, and another candidate who promises to give us that.